Hamas versus the IDF. The year 2006 began with two major events that rocked the Middle East. The first came in early January when Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon suffered a massive stroke. This left him in a coma from which he would never awaken. Deputy Prime Minister Ehud Olmert became the new Israeli Prime Minister. The second event came later that month during the Palestinian national elections. To everyone's shock and surprise, Hamas again did exceptionally well. Hamas retained political control of Gaza, which everyone expected. But no one expected Hamas to win big in the West Bank, particularly in traditional Fatah strongholds like Ramallah, Bethlehem, and Hebron. Hamas won 56% of the vote, giving them the right to form a government and take over administration of the Palestinian territories. However, Fatah won 34% of the seats, so they were still a significant opposition party. The Western world was appalled by these results. Hamas did not believe in the peace process and did not recognize Israel's legitimacy. And now, the United States and other Western nations were in a quandary. They had promoted democracy as the solution to the Muslim world's problems, but now they were angry with the Palestinians for exercising those democratic principles. The United States cut off all contact with the Palestinian government. Both the U.S. and the EU cut off all economic aid to Palestine. Meanwhile, Hamas went forward with creating a new government. Its leader, Ismail Haniyeh, became the new Prime Minister of Palestine, while Mahmoud Abbas, representing Fatah, remained its president. Since Israel would not allow Hamas's elected officials to travel to Ramallah, they had to take their oath of office via video link. But before Hamas could take over, the outgoing Fatah-controlled legislature transferred many of the powers of Prime Minister to the president. For the next several months, Hamas and Fatah jockeyed for power. But with Hamas stuck in Gaza, there was little they could do since the center of Palestinian Authority was in the West Bank. Hamas also continued to conduct militant activities. In late 2006, Hamas militants used a tunnel dug under the Gaza wall to attack an Israeli military outpost at Karem Shalom near the Sinai border. The militants killed 2 Israeli soldiers and kidnapped a third named Corporal Gilad Shalit. Israel responded by launching Operation Summer Rains, which was intended to stop rocket fire from Gaza and rescue Corporal Shalit. The operation began with Israeli warplanes attacking Gaza infrastructure and Hamas offices and camps. This was followed by a land invasion with Israeli troops occupying strategic locations in southern Gaza, while Israeli tanks entered northern Gaza. The Israeli army shelled Gaza from the land, while the Navy shelled Gaza from the sea. Israeli forces rolled over Hamas's defenses, and before long, most of Gaza had either been destroyed or secured by Israel. With that done, Israel began arresting members of Hamas while continuing to hit Gaza with airstrikes. And then something strange happened. On July 12th, Hezbollah forces crossed the Lebanese border into northern Israel. It is not clear if Hezbollah did this to relieve the pressure on Hamas, or if it was simply taking advantage of the situation in Gaza. Whatever the motivation, Hezbollah's raid caught Israel off guard. Hezbollah killed 3 Israeli soldiers in the north and captured 2 others who were taken back into Lebanon. Furious, Israel responded with airstrikes and artillery shelling into southern Lebanon. One of these strikes hit a civilian shelter, killing 28 people, including 16 children. Israeli ground forces then moved into southern Lebanon, but they found the Hezbollah militants were very different from Hamas. Hezbollah is a Shiite militant group and has been funded and trained by Iran for years. It is basically an Iranian proxy. The Hezbollah fighters were better equipped and trained than anything the IDF had faced in Gaza. Hezbollah was also fighting in familiar territory from well-fortified positions. With no air force, no artillery, and no navy, Hezbollah destroyed several Israeli tanks and even shot down an Israeli helicopter. By August, the IDF began to withdraw from Lebanon. Israel had not yet retrieved the 2 captive soldiers, but their losses were mounting. Israel had invaded with a force of 30,000 troops and lost about 120. Meanwhile, Hezbollah only had about 1,000 fighters and lost about 250. Of course, Lebanese civilians suffered the most. About 1,100 civilians were killed in the conflict. Afterwards, both sides claimed victory. Israel claims to have sufficiently punished Hezbollah for the raid. Hezbollah claims to have forced Israel to withdraw and that they still held the two captives. Ironically, Israel's invasion might have strengthened Hezbollah's position. The Lebanese government and the Lebanese people were grateful to Hezbollah for defending the nation. 2 years later, Hezbollah and Israel conducted a prisoner swap, and the remains of the two captured soldiers were returned to Israel. Israel believed they were killed during the initial Hezbollah raid, while the Lebanese government claims they were killed during Israeli airstrikes. A few months later, Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire. Corporal Shalit remained in Hamas custody for another 5 years. Hamas versus Fatah. Fatah and Hamas continued to bicker over control of the Palestinian territories. Fatah was angry with Hamas, blaming them for the violence in Gaza. Hamas was angry with Fatah for not handing over power. Tensions continued to escalate until it turned violent, with each side's security forces attacking the other. Fearing the situation was getting out of control, Saudi Arabia intervened. In February 2007, the kingdom hosted a meeting between Hamas and Fatah in the holy city of Mecca. This allowed representatives from both groups to work out their differences and come to an agreement. This resulted in the Mecca Agreement, where Hamas and Fatah agreed to form a unity government. But a few months later, fighting broke out again, and this time it was worse than ever. Over the next 2 months, fighting between Hamas and Fatah led to over 100 Palestinian deaths. The fighting ceased for a few months, but then started back up again in June 2007, primarily in Gaza. The United States, which refused to have anything to do with Hamas, announced it would provide training and weapons for Mahmoud Abbas's presidential guards. Hamas said this would give Fatah an unfair advantage which it would use to take over Gaza. A civil war was underway. This was perhaps the worst thing that could happen to the Palestinian cause. Within 5 days of fighting, Hamas had driven all Fatah forces out of Gaza, while Fatah had driven all Hamas representatives from the West Bank. And now, the already fragile, weak, and dependent Palestinian government was split in two. Fatah, recognized by Israel and the international community, controlled the West Bank. Hamas, isolated and an international pariah, controlled Gaza. Meanwhile, Hamas militants continued to launch rockets over the wall into Israeli territory. In September 2007, Israel declared Gaza hostile territory and partnered with Egypt to impose an economic blockade. Israel then went on to cut off electricity and fuel to Gaza while preventing any other supplies from entering.